In this video, I want to walk you through the basic functionalities and settings of the Nordrum 3P. So if you're new to the instrument, it's a great first lesson to learn on how to use it. And also, if you've been using it for a while, but you tend to forget certain parameters, certain settings, or anything like that, it's also a great place to come back to actually check how a certain thing works. My name is Yannis, and I feel quite confident saying that I know this instrument inside out since I've been using it for around 5 years and created so much stuff with it. Lots of online courses, sound packs, and also like full pieces of music, in fact like a full album. And also I created a video like this in the past. You can still find it. I'm going to link it here in the video description. I tried to make this a little shorter, and also I got some comments saying that it's a bit annoying that you could hear the sound of the stick hitting while also hearing the sound. So I also make sure that you don't hear the pad sound in this video, and it's just overall a little newer from like a 2026 perspective. Check the timestamps if you're looking for some particular topic. Also, don't hesitate to drop your questions down below in the comments if I don't answer any of your questions. And this being said, let's jump right into it. Oh, and by the way, this is a class meant for people who already have the Nordrum. If you're still thinking about getting it, of course, you're warmly invited to check out this video, but be known that there's like a more specific buying guide sharing with you in a shorter format what exactly the Nordrum can do and can't do, and I'm going to link it down below in the description. Let's start by turning it on, and you start with the A1 kit, and it's important to know that you have like 8 banks. So you have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and as a factory default you have A till D written kits like with factory presets, and starting on E you actually have empty kits where you can store your own ones, but you can also store your kits on any of those other positions later. And if you don't plan on making sounds with the Nordrum, which is something that I highly encourage you to do because I think it's quite some expensive instrument and you really get some value for your money if you learn how you can actually shape your own sounds with it. You can basically try those different kits, and actually I go to C because I don't think on A and B I still have the factory kit. So you have a collection of sounds. For naming the pads, it's already good to know about pad layouts because you see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and if you hit a pad, you see which one you're actually hitting with the green color, and the red color is actually for controlling the pad you're changing. So if it's on pad 1, I could change the settings for pad 1, here for pad 2, and so on. And for the button controls, it's important to know that you have like a white text, which means it's the value you actually change by simply clicking on the button, like here on distortion. And then I can actually change the left value, which is like the amount. And if I press lower parameter, I would change the type, which is with the red background. So it's important that you have 2 functions per knob basically, with the shift with the lower parameter button and without. And also here's the shift button, which you can use for accessing whatever there is below the button. So here you see we have pad sensitivity, pad threshold. Here there's no shift function, but here there are some shift functions. So we can hold down shift and, for example, go to system. And here we have something called pad layout. Maybe you have to click a couple of times. And right now I'm on pad layout 2 because it means that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is how they are organized. If I change to pad layout 1, I actually have pad 4 here. And then you also have pad layout 3, which means I have 6, 5, 4, like the other way around. And also pad layout 4, which gives me 3, 2, 1 in another direction. For me, it makes most sense to use this one because I think the kick drum is on the bottom left pad, and that feels most natural to me. But if this is confusing to you and you want to change it, just change the pad layout. You can also manually change sounds. So if you have like a kit you like, but you feel like I want to change those 2 pads, so this sound is here and this sound is here, you can hold down shift or make sure that you select one of those sounds. So let's say you want to change 2. Hold down shift, and here you have some additional function because those shift functions are copy and paste, which you can also do, but you can also swap by pressing those 2 buttons. Then you go to 3 and you again click swap, and then you swap those 2 pads. And it works the same for copy and paste. So let's say you want to copy this pad to this position. Then you go to pad 4, hold down shift and copy. go to 5, hold down Shift and paste, and you have it here as well. But now you have this sound 2 times. So if you copy and paste, you basically overwrite this pad and this sound will be gone. If you want to store the changes you made to the drum kit, you can hold down Shift and store kit, because if you didn't store it and move to another kit, it will just be gone. But now, if you see this flashing up, you can basically select the slot. So if you hit down Store Kit now, it would actually store it on position D8, also overwriting the kit that you started with. But you can also move to any other position and say, okay, I want to store it on F1, for example. You hit Store Kit, and then it will be stored at F1. If you like the kit, but you're looking for some other sound for a certain pad, you can also browse individual drums. So let's say you don't like the sound here, you want to add some normal snare, you go to drum, select, and start moving the knob. And first you get bass drums, but then at a certain point you get snare drums. And once you like one, you basically keep it. So if I go back to drum selector to any parameter, I still have the snare drum here, and you can modify it further or simply store it at whatever position you want to. I'll speak a bit about the sound manipulation later. I first want to focus on those basic controls so that you know, okay, you can find like a kit that you like and exchange sounds or pads and this kind of stuff. You could also go to the E section and actually start with some empty kit. And you could go pad by pad. So you go to the first one, drum select, and select bass drum. You go to the second one, select a snare drum and a little beat, and continue like this. And so you have different types of categories here. You have bass drum, snare drum, tom, hi-hat, cymbal, percussion, bells, tube type sounds, and also effect sounds. And also you have your user presets, which is also interesting, but I'll speak about this once we talked about manipulating the sound. Another thing that is really important in the beginning is also to change the pad sensitivity and pad threshold, because this depends on your preferences. I'm like a really dynamic drummer, so I like to have dynamics. And if you click Shift and pad sensitivity, it basically means that even if I play really softly, it still picks up the sound, or compared to if the sensitivity is at 1, see, I actually don't get a trigger here. And also it's less dynamic, so for me 19 is nice for having like a cool dynamic range. And the pad threshold is also important, because right now it's on 1, because it also means it starts picking up the sound immediately. If it would be at a higher setting, I could actually play and wouldn't trigger a note until I actually play quite loudly already, which I don't want. In certain scenarios, this can be helpful also because the Nord drum is a little sensitive to crosstalk sometimes. I mean, if you mount it tightly to a stand, it works, but I feel like if you're on a stage and lots of things are rumbling, that's the stuff the instrument doesn't like so much. And if you only use it for triggering really loud sounds or like one-shot sounds, I think then it's good to know about the pad threshold so you can modify this and you don't get like those false triggers. But I always have it at 1. And 2 more little things before we head over to the sound design part. So if you use this button, you can also trigger the pad you choose. So pad 1, pad 2, pad 3, which is nice sometimes if you don't want to hit it with a stick all the time, but you only get the highest velocity sound this way. So if you want to create something dynamic, it's a little limited in how you can actually judge the sound, but it's good to know. And also you can change it to hand mode. So here it has the pad mode. You can hold down Shift, pad mode, and change this to hand. It's a little more sensitive than the stick setting. I don't feel like it's a huge difference, but if you like playing with hands, I would change it to that mode, and then it's just a little more sensitive and it can actually be super fun. As I mentioned, you can use the internal sounds and have lots of fun with them, but I feel like the Nord drum has so much more to offer once you understand how you can create sounds yourself, and it's also fairly simple. I think it might look a bit confusing, but there aren't so many controls, and it's also like a great exercise on learning how synthesizers work, because it's a synthesizer and has the most important settings. And I have the empty kit again. Let's select the first one and explore what we can do here, because you have a mix section which mixes a tone and a noise sound. And here you have the noise section and here you have the tone section, which means if both are on 0, we don't have sound. If we have the tone, we actually have the stuff we can control here. Oh, the noise, sorry, I always mix them up. So the upper one is noise. So see, now we got the noise. And if I increase the tone, we have the tone part, and it's about making a sound with either one of those, or you can also mix them, of course. Let's focus on the tone section first, which starts with the spectra wave. And this is like the basic waveform. You can also see it as some sort of sample that you tweak further, but just that it's a waveform because it's a synthesizer, so it's like some digital file or actually digital signal. And in this older video, I walk you through all of them in a very detailed way. I don't want to do it in this video because you can explore stuff yourself, and also be known that I have like a full class about sound design with the Nord Drum 3P, which is like really a hands-on guide on how to make kick drums, snare drums, cymbals, toms, synth basses, synth sounds, ambience, etc. Link is down below in the description. Here I want to give you some basic workflow. So the waveform is important. So you see if I have A1, it sounds different than, for example, A4. Or it sounds different than H2. So this is like a basic sound, and you don't have to overcomplicate it here. You can simply browse through them and start with something that you like, although the basic sound is always really cold. That's why I want to give you some typical examples of sounds that I also use most of the time. So A1, for example, is a sine wave. And you can pitch it by clicking on pitch and tune it down. For example, so pitch is kind of self-explanatory. The spectra will check for another sound, also the filter, because the decay is also really important. It's the length of the note. So a low amount is really short. You barely hear it. And a high amount is really long. And you have different decay modes. So E1, 2, 3 are exponential. L is long, so it's great for long sounds. You also have punch, which is great for drum sounds because it adds some additional punch. And also it has like a setting for dynamic decay, which is super awesome because it means I can tell a highest and lowest value. And if I play with a high velocity, it's a long sound. If I play with a low velocity, it's shorter. Really great for expressive drumming. But for making a kick drum out of this sound, you need the bend time, which is the most crucial thing in designing drum sounds, a pitch envelope. And a pitch envelope basically means that you slide to the pitch that you set here in a time that you set. So if this is on 0, we don't hear any difference. If we increase the pitch envelope intensity, we get this kind of knock sound, because right now the time is really short. If we make it longer, you get this space type sound that can sound really annoying, but actually it's great for understanding it, because if it's really long and also the intensity is a bit lower, you hear what's happening. We slide down from a higher pitch. And if this one is really short, we actually get this kind of attack that you know from a drum sound. And then you fine tune it. So for example, right now I feel like, okay, the decay has to be shorter. And we have our first kind of kick drum. It's just a very simple example, but it's how this engine works. By the way, in case you enjoy this video and also feel like supporting the channel, you can take a quick second to hit the like button and be also warmly invited to subscribe, because I regularly share videos about music production and also sometimes about using my gear, or more specifically drumming technique, because I'm a drummer and it's like a big passion of mine to use drumming technique for producing electronic music. And also be known that I have some online store where you can find lots of content about the Nord Drum 3P. So if you want to support me, you can find some sound packs there and also some classes, because there's one for developing some basic drumming technique. There's one deep dive class all about the Nord Drum where you can learn all the parameters in a way that it makes sense. So you can learn how you make specific sounds like bass sounds, kick sounds, snare sounds, cymbal sounds, pads, basses, etc. And there's also my newest class, which is called 50 Compositions for the Electronic Drummer. In fact, it's like a full album, but also a class. So you can also listen to the album. Link is down below in the description. But the class teaches you nothing more than 50 songs that you can learn entirely by using your drumming technique. So I use the Nord Drum 3P. You can also apply it to an eDrum kit or another pad. But it's all about using your hands, sometimes your foot, for producing or actually playing live full pieces of music. And it was a lot of work. And I think you can learn really a lot from it, especially when it comes to finishing more music and also having more fun, because it's a very physical thing. And yeah, enough talk, warm invitation to check it out. Let's check out another example. Let's change to A3 and actually take off the pitch envelope, because now we are creating something melodic, like a bass. A3 is like a sawtooth waveform. You can also find it on basically any synth. And now we got a filter setting. And let's actually check the sound. So we get this kind of synth tone. And now we also have a setting on the left side, spectrum. It basically adds some sort of modulation to the sound. So this differs from waveform to waveform, and you can also check the menu if you're looking for the exact description, or also my older video. But again, don't overcomplicate it. Just see what happens, if you like what's happening or if you don't like. So at the A3, for example, you can add some chorus, and at a certain point you get intervals. So here it's like some octave, which is great for making the sound a bit fatter. For example, for some classic synth bass sound, let's make it a bit longer. Actually, here we could explore the L. And also the filter, because right now, the first setting we have is that the frequency is at 0 and the dynamic filter at 9. If both is at 0, we almost don't hear anything, because it's like a filter that we closed completely. And if we increase the amount for the left value, we open the filter and we close the filter. So actually this is some super simple setting for some ambient song that you use this type of sound. You modulate the filter with your left hand and you send it into a reverb. So here you have the reverb delay. I'll speak about it more later, but for example, if you increase the reverb for this pad, you can set it per pad and use some really long reverb. Actually, it's still on Hall. It's quite a fun sound already. So you see, you don't have to overcomplicate making sounds. Sometimes 2 or 3 settings are enough for actually creating something cool. Let's take off the reverb again and explore the dynamic filter, because this is really one of my favorite tools. Like the dynamic decay that I was showing you, it also reacts to your velocity. So let's close the filter, but increase the dynamic filter. So now you see we get some sort of filter envelope. Let's shorten the decay for now. But if I play softer, we actually get less of the intensity, and I usually like a setting around 6 or 5. And it works particularly well with the dynamic decay. So we actually get a long and bright sound with high velocity and a short and darker sound with a low velocity. And with melodic sounds, you can have a lot of fun on the Nord drum, because now we only edited this pad, but you have some mode that is called Edit All Channels. So if you click Shift and Edit All Channels, all changes you make to one pad are automatically made for all the other pads. So if we just move those knobs once, so we have the same setting as before, it will automatically transfer it to those other pads. So as soon as you move something, it's going to be transferred. This one we don't need. And and the pitch, wait. And now I messed it up a bit. So let's make the sound short for now. Because there's a setting, if you click on lower parameter, you can set a scale. Actually, I'll take off the scale again. Those are now some octaves higher, because the pitch is going to be set relatively, so it transposes all the other pads. So if I move this one down, it also moves the other ones one down, but it doesn't automatically sync it. But there's some amazing feature that I did accidentally already. If you press lower parameter, then you see SC, which means scale, and then you can automatically assign a scale to this patch once all channels are selected. So now we can actually play melodies with all those 6 pads. And once you leave that mode, you can again make changes to the individual pads and also to the tones. But this is basically a great tool for quickly setting up like some melodic patch and playing some sequences. And another important setting for a patch like this is the monogroup setting. So you can hold down Shift and monogroup, then you see we actually keep the green light. And if we do it for all those sounds, they will cut each other off. So it's basically not like 6 individual voices. It's like one voice that can be played at a time. And for this, we can actually make the decay longer again. So if I play this one, I can cut it off. Which means we don't get the overlap, which is great because sometimes if you have long sounds, but too many of them, the sound can get a bit messy. And if you want to get some super transparent, clear sound, it's really great to use the monogroups. I think that's enough for the tone section, but be known if you try those different waveforms that it's always some interplay also with the filter setting. And a good example are the FM waveforms. So F means FM. And without any filtering, so if they are completely open, actually the first setting is always this one. It sounds so ugly, it's really like one of the most terrible sounds, but you have to close the filter envelope for actually making it some cool sound. And that counts for other sounds as well. So if you go to the H waveforms, they have lots of overtones. And you can control them with this envelope setting and the dynamic filter. So just keep this in mind once you're browsing here, that the first setting might sound really bad, but try playing with the filter first before you actually judge that it's the wrong one. Let's check out the noise. So we can use the same pad. Let's simply mute the tone and bring in the noise. And you can think of the noise as basically like a white noise waveform where you can change the length. So you have decay again, so you can make it short and long, with different modes. So you have E2, E1, 2, and 3 again. Also like a long one. Great for ambient. And also like a gate mode, which basically is some on-off mode. You actually have to change the filter envelope. So let's take off the dynamic filter. It's actually the same as here. Open it a bit and then you hear the gate. So you cut it off immediately, which is great for some sound effect. And you have the same dynamic setting here, which is great. Actually, let's change this to some more envelope setting again. So decay, kind of self-explanatory. Filter, kind of the same as here, but you can choose different filter forms here, which is really important. So let's take off the dynamic filter. So now it's basically the same. We start with a low pass filter, which means if it's on 0, there's almost no sound and we can slowly open it. Or if we add the dynamic filter, we actually create this movement in the beginning. Great for percussive sounds, but there are other types of filters. For example, actually you have 2 low-pass filters, and you also have band-pass filters. Band-pass filters means they take both low frequencies and high frequencies away, so it's a thinner sound. And you basically move this part where you have the frequencies from low to high. Actually quite a fun tool. You also have high pass filters, which means that we take off the low frequencies. So here we get all the sound, and here we make it thinner, which is great for hi-hat sounds actually. Sounds great with this dynamic decay setting. There's one more setting, which is the resonance, and maybe you already know it from other filters or also EQs. So it basically means at the position where the filter is working, you boost it a little. So for the low pass filter, it means if we take off the frequencies here, which is probably somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, we can increase the resonance, and with noise, it often creates some sort of tone, which is really interesting, making the noise a little more intense. There's one kind of hidden setting that is super cool, which is when you're at the dynamic filter, you can move it to a higher position, but if you move the knob left, you actually got R. And this is like a swell, and this is basically like a attack. So if you increase the decay and have the R setting here, you get a nice noise swell. which is super great because the Nord drum is like some percussion synthesizer, so almost any sound is like bam, there right away. And this is one of the few tricks on how to actually create some sort of swell and some sort of sound that doesn't have some immediate attack. And let's just check out some setting for a snare drum, because it's a combination of noise and tone. So here you see both is actually on, but on different levels. Let's check the tone and the noise. So here we actually have a short decay kind of, and static filter setting without the dynamic filter, because sometimes the is also too much. You just want to have like a nice steady noise sound, and the high pass filters, so we take off some of the low frequencies. Great setting for snare drum. And then we mix it with the tone, which is basically like the drum tone, like simple sine wave, really short decay, and a little bit of the bend time. And pitch is here, and that's basically all you need for creating some simple snare drum. There's actually a third part of the sound, which is also noise. It's called click. And if I mute both parts of the sound but bring in the click, we have different types of short noise impacts. Basically like a transient. So if you have a sound that lacks a bit of a transient that you want to make a little punchier, you can simply mix in a little of this click. Really useful setting. Here we have 3 settings that take place after the mix, because first we mix noise and tone, and then it goes into the EQ. And the EQ is a little awkward, but also kind of self-explanatory, because you have the frequency. All the way to the left is bass, probably like 30 Hertz. All the way to the right on the value 50, probably like 20,000 Hertz. And you have to use your ears, because this is not like some frequency. You just know, okay, here's probably bass. So if I boost it, it gets super bassy, or if I take it out here, it gets super thin. Sometimes it's helpful, but again, a bit abstract because you don't see the actual frequency terms. Also, you get some distortion. Great. So if you click on this, you go on the drive mode. Great for making sounds more aggressive, and sometimes, especially for low sounds or low kick drums, it can make them punch a bit more better through the mix. If you hold down lower parameter, you can also find the sample and not the sample and hold, sample reduction mode, which basically destroys your signal, and it's super great for sound design. Really fun, just like the ring modulator, which at low volume, at low amounts, gives you some interesting, almost like a tremolo. And then you get some cool artifacts and create some new tones at a certain speed. Super great for anything experimental. And you've seen me already using the reverb. So basically you say, okay, I want to send this amount into the reverb and this amount into the delay. And the reverb is global, but you can set the amount per pad. So you can say, okay, here the reverb is like 25. That's actually a nice sound. And for this pad, there's no reverb. Still the initial sound. But that's basically how it works. And the reverb type you can change here. So right now it's on Hall. I somehow like this Hall setting. It's the longest reverb algorithm, but I don't like the short ones so much. Depends on your taste, of course. Also, some of the reverbs are a little noisy. You may have read this in forums. And I like the Hall one because it creates some ongoing reverberation and it doesn't die off. Because if you listen closely, it also depends on the sound. Sometimes you hear like, okay, it sounds weird, because if the reverb tail ends, also there's some noise disappearing, and that makes everything a little unnatural. So yeah, definitely see the reverb issue here, and that's why I use Hall most of the time. But you can also add your own reverb later. And the delay is kind of similar workflow. So you bring in the delay. It's not on yet. And actually, let's make this tone a bit shorter, because here you can hear the delay. So you have the rate. At high rates and high feedbacks, you get some nice new tones because the feedback time is just so high and the rate is so slow, actually so fast. Also, you can sync it to a rhythm. So if you hold down Shift and BPM, you're at this BPM setting. Actually, this is like some micro setting because it tries to adapt the rate because it was so fast. You have to move it to the left to actually enter the BPM menu. Let's go all the way to the left. So we start with 60. So it's basically like seconds. At a certain point, you see that you go back to, where's the change? 180. Actually, you have 179. And then you have 90 again, but eighth notes. That's when this little icon here appears. So when there's one of those bars, you're actually at 180, and it happens again. So if you're here, you're actually on basically 360 because it's 16th notes in tempo 90. Sounds a bit confusing, but you can just check where you're before. So it's 8th notes at 179. So here it's going to be 16th notes at 90 or 8th notes at 180. Yeah, there's no easier way of explaining this. You can also check the manual again. It's a little it's a little weird, this kind of system, but you get used to it. And also the delay is really unspectacular. You can't set any filters, you can't modulate it. So it's great if you need a very simple delay. Otherwise, you can also get some more expressive stuff with alternative plugins or effect pedals. And I think we're kind of getting towards the end because those were almost all onboard settings that are important. However, it's super powerful if you're using Midi, and that's what I also want to speak about a little. It also has some Midi menus, so let's first check those settings, and then I also want to share with you how you can hook it up with a sequencer, controller, or also like your DAW. So for Midi settings, it's important to know that there's a global channel, and that's the one that you use for sending Midi, because the Nord drum can only send Midi on one channel. So you can't say pad 1 is going to send on channel 1, pad 2 is going to send on channel 2. It's only going to be the global channel. They can receive individually, which is what I'm going to show you in a second. But for sending, it's only going to be this one channel. In this case, it's set to 10. It's like the default setting. And then you have the individual channels. So here you see it's different for all those pads, and that's the channel where they can receive Midi. So if you want a pad to receive on a specific Midi channel, you can change it here. Also, you can set the Midi node that it's going to send. So I think right now it's basically a C3. So this would be like a C#3 and so on. So that's also what you can change. So you see different notes per pad. This is program change, so you can make it send or receive program change messages or simply set it off. So it's off, send, receive, send, receive. And I have a little short on how you can send program changes, for example, from Ableton to a device like the Nord drum. I'm also trying to link it down below. CC is basically the parameter modulation because you can, you can make it receive information from like a hardware controller or also like your DAW for the parameters. So you can send in some LFO that modulates the filter frequency, for example. So if it's on receive, it receives that stuff. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And here, I don't know what it is with this send because it simply is on send all the time. And local lets you turn off the local engine. So if I turn this off, you see, we don't get any sound and I can only play it externally. So if you hook up some controllers, some sequencers, you have to use them because basically the local sound engine is off. So let's see how it works with Ableton. So I'm going to create some Midi track, and for drums, it's great to have like a drum rack. And you have to make sure that Midi out goes to Midi in of your interface. So you see, if I arm this track, actually we don't want the sound right now. We send a signal on C3. And again, if this would be, I would change this Midi node to 61. I would send on C#3. So that's just important to know here. And then you basically select any kind of sample that you want to trigger, put it here, and you're good to go. And it's the same for any hardware. So you basically send it to the hardware. It sends the node that you select under Midi. And here it's on MIDI from all channels. Maybe if you have like some controller that is specific and wants to know a channel, you have to select channel 10, because that's the one right now where the Nord drum sends. Unless you change the global channel to, for example, 8, then you also have to tell the device that it receives MIDI from channel 8. You can also sequence the Nord drum, and this is where it gets super powerful. Let's create some MIDI track and actually send the MIDI to, in my case, audio fuse, because that's where I send the MIDI to, or which is my MIDI hub. And then I send it to channel 1, which is my kick drum. And I can simply program a clip with a couple of kick drums, and now I should receive a signal. Great. However, you can also sequence melodically. So let's set up another track. This time I'm going to change it to channel 2, which is a bass sound. And now I can program like a chromatic bass melody. It's going to sound really awful probably, but just so you see that we can create those different pitches. Or you could also play it with the controller. So if I enable the keyboard control, so I can simply use my keyboard for playing this sound. And you can do this for all those 6 pads. So this turns one instrument into basically 6 mono synthesizers, because you can have 6 melodies running at the same time independently. And what I was mentioning about the CC control, if you have something that can send CC to the instrument, so Ableton can do it, but also I have the Syntec, for example, and it can also send CC to another MIDI device. I actually have some videos where I speak about this in detail. I'm going to link them down below in the description and in the pinned comment. But here in Ableton, you also have the modulator. Actually, under MIDI effects, it's called CC control. And if you read the menu of the Nord drum, the manual, you will see that all those controls receive MIDI on their channel. So if I want to modulate, for example, the bass, I can also modulate different parameters. And you can set the destination here. Now I don't know by heart which one there are. Let me quickly check. Okay, so actually tone frequency, so the filter frequency is 52. And if we select it here, we can actually play the sequence. Control it here. And yeah, this stuff is so powerful and so fun. And that's also why I think you get the most out of the Nord drum if you really explore how you can make sounds yourself and how you can modulate the stuff, because then you're really in sound design heaven. And I think that's all that I wanted to say in this video, although I'm pretty sure I forgot something. And if it's the case, just don't hesitate to drop your question down below in the comments. And now, let me just say thank you for following me. I really hope this was helpful and you feel inspired to actually make music with the Nord drum. If you liked this video and also want to get deeper into the Nord drum, understanding how it can make sounds, how it works, develop some creative strategies, be known that I made lots of classes for, actually not lots of classes, but quite some classes that go really deep about it. So there's one about drumming technique, how to play or how to learn drums with a small electronic drum pad. There's all about the Nord drum, which is like a deep dive on sound design. So after this class, you will know how to create kick drums, snare drums, cymbals, basses, pad sounds, and all this type of stuff. And also there's like a big class that is the newest one. It's called 50 Compositions for the Electronic Drummer, where I basically created a full album with 50 little songs made entirely with the Nord drum 3P. And in this class, I teach you all of them. So you basically learn how to make full songs using only your drumming technique and only the Nord drum 3P. If you want to check out some more videos on YouTube, there are 2 suggestions for you. Here's some more emotional review of why I like the Nord drum 3P so much. And here's a playlist with my favorite Nord drum 3P performances, so you can see it in action and also listen to some of the sounds. Apart from that, I wish you lots of inspiration with whatever it is that you create and really hope to see you soon again at this channel. Bye.